connection to energy. And yeah, please excuse that I cannot be there today. We're in the construction phase, and as Harald mentioned in the beginning, we have quite a tight time frame to yeah, finish our construction still in this year and commission the Oshivela plant also still this year. Yeah, I've prepared a presentation to yeah, focus on the link between energy and iron making, because yeah, our project or the HyIron startup has been born in Namibia about 5 years ago, and it has been born from the idea to make the great energy potentials that we have here in Namibia usable for products that we can export and that can contribute in the industrial transition. I see that I think the first slide is still a bit small. It's roughly half what we can see on the screen now. So maybe it's not so important on this first slide. Ah, yeah, there it is. But on the next ones. As you can see here, the key topics of the Oshivela project are hydrogen and iron. Those two yeah, are the key words. Next to it, PV and the sun is important, renewable energies in general, but all of it comes together near Arandis, where I'm also now situated, where we built this plant. Yeah, and why iron? So iron today, or the manufacturing or production of iron today is one of the biggest CO2 emitters that we have. It comes from or the reason for it is in the process in manufacturing iron from iron ore. On this picture, you can see some iron ore from Namibia. And to make it what we later use so much in our everyday life, into making it steel or cast iron, there's a yeah, energy intensive process connected to it. And yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago, it was a group of people that came together here with us in Namibia, and had the idea to make iron different to how yeah, it has been made up till now. So why did we think about that? Yeah, and I think there's a bit again something cut off. Yeah, we're a bit further to the right. Um, why did we think about that? Number one, we believe that the yeah, urgency of climate change is not met in many of the industrial transition focus, because very little is so far done to make industrial processes yeah, CO2 free. And one of the key reasons why we work is because we see the yeah, the strong impacts of climate change. I saw it a lot already in my yeah, in the time before starting HyIron. I'm from the region of Otjiwarongo, where we yeah, had some severe droughts in some years, and a lot of my colleagues lost a lot of their livelihood, or at least their retirement policy, in form of cattle and sheep. And yeah, there were some that said it's a normal thing to have droughts. but also many that said to have them repeatedly coming back like this in such a severity, it's something new that we didn't see. And yeah, as you can see on this slide, it's a slide by the Namibian government with an estimation of yeah, the possibility of bigger scale cattle farming. So today, the yellow line presents the border of where or larger scale cattle farming is still possible. The estimations are that by 2045, this line will have moved significantly northeast, and then by 2065, so yeah, when my daughters are in my age, then yeah, we will only be able to do cattle farming northeast of Otjiwarongo, and a whole big area that where before we produced a lot of food will not be available anymore for food production. Also, where I'm now, I'm on a farm near or between Usakos and Arandes. This farm belonged to a family that lived here for generations, and for three generations, they had all the time around 5,000 sheep. Today, now it's the 10th year of drought. There was one year in between where there was rain, but for 12 years in total, or for 10 years in total, there was no rain anymore. So all the 5,000 sheep died or had to be sold and removed. So a whole yeah, big production moved away because of something happening that never happened before. So 10 years of drought. Yeah, and why do we have a climate change, or what's the history of it? That is on the slide. You can see the history of energy usage, and for a very very long time, until roughly 1980. 1875, the majority of energy was coming from traditional biomass. With a carbon cycle, when the carbon was released by burning the biomass, it was also retrieved again by plants that were regrowing. Then in 1875 or here it's written 1859, that's when the first time fossil fuels were used in form of oil and burned yeah, to use the energy of the fossil fuels, which are a lot more practical than traditional biomass. And yeah, this led to yeah, what we all know, the first industrial transition, where suddenly somewhere in the beginning of the 20th century, all of a sudden we used more energy from coal than from traditional biomass, and this has been rising significantly. The use of coal, but also and then especially also the use of oil and yeah, energy carriers based on oil. Later also gas became part of it, and yeah, today you can see that we use a lot more energy than ever before. And this energy transition, we can see a lot of history about that also here with us in Namibia. For example, where I am now, there's still an old railway line where you can see a lot of the charcoals or the coals lying next to the tracks that have been yeah, fueling those trains that brought and people and material into the country from the coast. Today, we stand at another point of transition because we realize more and more, and we see more and more that a new energy source has become the cheapest of our time, especially with us here in Namibia. Energy from photovoltaic, from solar, has become by far the cheapest source of energy. And this triggers a transition which is not only important for climate, but also very important for us here in Namibia, I believe. And that is that all of a sudden we are at a tipping point where it makes more sense to produce to do industrial production based on this energy source of solar and possibly in future also wind generated energy. And while we are at such a tipping point, there is also a lot of demand worldwide for products that have a positive CO2 balance, or at least equal or 0 to 0 CO2 balance. There are many companies that promise their customers that they will produce their products in future based on materials that were manufactured at 0 emissions. Yeah, this looks very technical, so I won't go into much detail, but it is an overview of the different technologies to make iron and steel at the end. So iron and steel is the most, or together with cement, the most used material in the world. A majority of it goes into construction. So most of the steel that we manufacture goes into the construction of houses and infrastructure. And thereafter, the second most goes into manufacturing cars, actually. And worldwide, we need every year around about 2 billion tons of steel. So it's an incredible number. While considering that each ton of steel makes up for 1.8 tons of CO2 emissions, one can imagine the vast amount of CO2 emissions that we currently have because of the manufacturing of steel. This is on the very left. These are all the traditional ways. And I guess a lot of people heard about the most important, about the big blast furnaces that were especially established in the times of the industrialization, in the places where there was most of the energy available in form of coals. So where the big industrial centers of the 20th century have been built. That was all based on blast furnaces where you put in coals and iron ore to finally get liquid iron that you can then bring in or convert into steel. Then on the right, there are some other production methods that are currently not so important. They make up for much smaller quantities than the blast furnace. And in the middle here, that's recycling. So that's where you use scrap metal, melt it again, and make new steel from it. So that's one of the big advantages of steel as a material, is that you can recycle it almost indefinitely. So many cycles where you can reuse it for a different purpose. But on the other hand, it's also one of the materials with the longest longevity. So it has a lifespan that is incredibly long, so that we can only recycle very small quantities compared of the new quantities that we need every year. So in 2020, it was around about 430 million tons. And then on the very right side are the completely green processes. That means we start with the iron ore that is taken from the ground, and that we use one of the two major, there are some more smaller, but two major technologies to make from iron ore pure iron. And there are a lot of steel manufacturers that work a lot in the field of shaft furnaces. So that's furnaces that stand upright and that have very, very big investments, very similar to the blast furnaces. So a a furnace or a shaft furnace, they start at investments of around about 1 billion US dollars. So that are massive investments that only very, very few countries can afford. And that's why currently, for example, in Africa, there are only 9 countries that can produce iron from iron ore, while all the G20, so the biggest countries, they all have the capability to do iron. And we, in contrast, we don't use a shaft furnace. We use a rotary kiln. So that's a kiln that is lying horizontally, and that has a lot of advantages for us here in Namibia. Because number one, it's much more scalable. So it's a modular technology that can be repetitively used. And currently there are only one or two, maybe two or three projects in the world that we know about that use such a technology to produce iron. The two are, one is the one in Lingen, the other one is our Oshivela project, and possibly there's one Scandinavian company that is thinking about using such a technology. So while the shaft furnaces are still in the making, we already have a running pilot plant in Lingen that can do up to 1 ton of pure iron based on hydrogen per hour. And the other big factory that can do 1 ton per hour is a shaft furnace by SSAB in Sweden. But so these two projects, they currently share to be the biggest productions of iron at zero emissions. Our project here in Namibia, the Oshivela project, will then be much bigger than the two. So there we will, or we are planning to do 5 tons per hour. So what do we precisely do in that furnace? On the left, you can see that's the traditional process of making iron. So in this blast furnace that I showed before, it works a bit making a cake. So there we put in coals and then iron ore, coals and iron ore, and then the coals are starting to burn, so they oxidize to become carbon monoxide. And the carbon monoxide is a very, very strong reactant, that means that it wants to catch another oxygen from wherever possible to become a much more stable material, and that is carbon dioxide. And in the blast furnace, it's organized or the furnace is organized in such a way that there's not enough oxygen available, so that the carbon monoxide needs to draw the oxygen from the iron ore. And the iron ore as an oxide is then reacting to become pure iron. From the blast furnace, it's called pig iron, and the carbon monoxide is becoming carbon dioxide and is released into the atmosphere. So this is how currently all of the iron in the world is manufactured. It's all based on carbon monoxide. And what we are working on is to replace the carbon monoxide by hydrogen, or in best case by green hydrogen. So the hydrogen as H2 is similarly strong reactant like the carbon monoxide, and in a certain environment, and when the reaction is helped a bit by heating it up, then the hydrogen also reacts with the oxygen of the iron ore, so the iron oxide. And in this reaction, what we produce is not carbon dioxide, but what we get back is our water, so the H2O. So the H2 draws the oxygen from the iron ore, and we've got pure water back. On the other hand, we've got the pure iron. It's called sponge iron because its physical attributes change. So if you take out the oxygen, it's suddenly becoming porous, and you've got pure iron, which is not melted, but pure powder without oxygen. And this process means also that roughly 1/3 of the weight of the iron ore is removed, and we've got a pure iron that is then 2/3 of what we put in before. Yeah, and this is the overall process. So what we do is we mine the iron ore, so we take it out of the ground. Then we mill it into a fine material, so into kind of a sand. And because luckily iron is magnetic, or relatively magnetic, depending on the ores that you mine, it can be separated from the waste material, from the sand, with magnets. And then we've got a relatively pure iron ore concentrate that we bring into our furnace here in the middle. On the other side, we produce energy from sun. And with that energy, we split up water into the two molecules. On the one hand, oxygen that we release into the air. On the other hand, the hydrogen that we bring into the furnace. And then in the furnace, we heat up, or the hydrogen we actually heat it up before the furnace, but in the furnace we heat everything up to around about 900 to 1,000 degree, and under such conditions the hydrogen reacts with the oxygen of the iron ore, so that we get back water that we filter out of the air and bring it back into our electrolysis, so where the hydrogen is produced. And on the other hand, we take out the iron, the pure iron, and pellet it into a briquette. Yeah, and that iron here on the left, you can see the difference. So on the very left, the red one, that's iron ore. And then when it comes out of our process, it looks gray, almost silver. And that material then can be used in many, many different ways. So there are foundries where it's melted and then poured into forms. There are steel works where it's mixed with other elements to become steel with a lot of different attributes. And then there's also something that we do some science projects on, because the iron can also be a medium to transport hydrogen, because the reaction that I showed you before, you can also turn it around. And a long time ago, people, actually they found hydrogen by oxidizing iron. So what you do then is you bring the Fe into an environment into a closed environment where there's water, vapor, and then the iron reacts again with the oxygen of the water, and you've got pure H2 back. So iron can actually also be a medium to transport energy. Yeah, and just in short about our history. So it was 2019 that my partners and I developed the idea of manufacturing iron here in Namibia. When we saw the red dunes, the famous red dunes, they are so red because they have so much iron. When you then also see the sun, then that's how the idea was born to use the iron ore that we have in Namibia to produce green iron without CO2 emissions. And then right away, we send some tasks for making trials to one of our project partners, Elino in Düren, near Aachen. And in the lab furnace, so this is a very small lab furnace that you can see on the very left, we did the first trials with really good results of making iron with hydrogen. Then in 2020, we applied for a funding grant by the government of a part of Germany, Lower Saxony. So we found some partners to realize this project. One is RWE. They are one of the bigger energy manufacturers in Germany, and Benteler on the other side. They are a steel manufacturer. And we won that project and started construction of our pilot plant in Lingen near the old nuclear power plant and the gas power plant in 2021. At the same time, we worked on an application towards the German government where we took part in a competition of international hydrogen projects. So the German government wanted to fund, I think, 5 projects internationally to use innovative hydrogen uses. And we won that project, so that in 2022, when the German Vice Chancellor came to visit Namibia, we were handed over the co-funding of the German government. So they fund roughly 50% of our Oshivela project. And then, in 2023, we finished the construction of our plant in Lingen. And also we had the groundbreaking of our project here in Namibia, the Oshivela project, where we started construction now in April. Where we then also base on a lot of international projects with many of the big steel manufacturers in the world. So we do now trials with Australian companies and Brazilian and from all over the world. And in future, it will be quite likely that a lot of the iron ores for the future manufacturing will be brought to Namibia to be tested if they also work here. Yeah, and maybe I come back to this slide a little bit after this. This is just to show that was our opening of the plant in Lingen. You can see on top, that's a lot of the officials, the politicians from Germany, but also our ambassador, our Namibian ambassador to Germany. He was there to push the button, and that's when we started to produce the first green iron then in Germany. Yeah, and currently we are in the phase of realizing the phase 1 Oshivela project, where we aim to produce 5 tons of iron an hour, roughly 3,000 hours a year, to produce 15,000 tons an hour a year. So that we will abate around about 27,000 tons of CO2 emissions, which is already almost 1% of all the CO2 emissions that Namibia has currently, with all cars, all the processes. For that, we need a PV power plant that we are currently building of 25 megawatt, and we will only produce then in daytime, so only when the sun is shining. Currently, we are also doing the feasibility for the next scale-up phases. So in the next phase, we would expand it, the production to 25 tons an hour. So we would add 4 more rotary kilns. Then we aim at producing 8,000 hours a year. That means also in the night. Because we can store the energy that we have in batteries and in form of hydrogen. And then we aim at an annual production of 200,000 tons. For that, a PV power plant of 260 megawatt is needed, and roughly 360,000 tons of CO2 would be abated, which is already 10% of Namibia's emissions. And then the third phase, which is still a dream, but which is yeah, for the iron and steel industry, still a normal size project. We are aiming at 2 million tons an hour. That would need around about 2,600 megawatt of energy. It would abate 3.6 million tons of CO2 emissions. And yeah, if we can realize that, then Namibia is combined with the first two phases would be completely CO2 neutral. Yeah, this is the expansion or the ideas of the expansion. There are still a lot of questions that need to be answered. But one thing is for sure, 2 million tons are very little for the world. Just alone, Germany needs around about 50 million tons of iron every year. So the 2 million tons would just be a small amount covering the need of just one of the countries. I will jump this slide and go straight to how yeah, the production will look like. This here you can see in the background, this is the PV power plant. Then a bit further in front, this are the electrolyzers. So it's actually 2 stacks of electrolyzers that do 6 megawatt of hydrogen an hour. In the background here, you can see the battery containers because it's a complete off-grid system. Yeah, in the foreground, you can see the big furnace that will where we will produce the iron. This is a more closer look at it. You can see there are lots of filters to filter out the sand from the water vapor that we reuse to get back the water for the hydrogen production. On the left, you can see these blue machines. They are briquetting machines, so that's where we bring the iron into a briquette form. And behind you can see the containers that we will use to run the furnace in. Yeah, and I think I can jump that slide. Maybe if there are questions, I can go back to it. I now still have a short video to show you how it looks here on site at the moment. And yeah, then I would be very happy to take questions and also jump back to some of the slides. Okay, I just have to see. Can share that video. Is it coming? I hope so. So I'll just play it now. That's the last update we did. On the right, you can see how the construction has started for the PV plant. These are the holes for the poles that we are making. In the background here, you can see containers with all the materials. Those are my colleagues with who we do the construction. The excavators that make the holes for the stands of the PV power plant, the assembly of them. In the background, you can see the desert. And that's how then the panels are installed. We will need to install around about 44,000 panels and around about 16,000 of the poles that go into the ground. I can do that. And this is a view from on top. And yeah, this is Oshivela. Harald, I can't hear you yet. I cannot hear you.
Now, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Perfect.
Johannes, I thought you were next door. Okay. This is a prime example of how a threat can be turned into an opportunity. I think desertification, how do you call it in English? Desertification is a real threat in Namibia. But I like the fact that the iron content that was identified with a combination of sun has now led to a new business idea. And this business idea has further increased the profile of Namibia internationally with another prize we've won. And I think this is what we need to put Namibia even further on the map. And we have to compliment you and congratulate you on your endeavors. Well, very well done.
Thank you very much.
I did not understand too much as far as the technical aspect is concerned, but I believe there's a lot of commercial value. There's a lot of CO2 carbon neutrality that we can get out of the project. And I think this is where the world is heading, whether we like it or not. We can talk about the speed. Maybe it's going to happen and has to happen in the next 20 years, maybe in the next 30 years, but it will have to happen. So really, thank you for being instrumental in innovation, and a lot of innovation is currently associated with Namibia. This makes us very, very proud. Now, Johannes, you ready to take questions? We've got the first question here, Mr. von Hase.
Thanks. Johannes, if I might call you by your first name, Reimer von Hase, would you be so good as to enlighten us a little more on this, where you will derive the ore from, or do you intend to mine through our beautiful dunes and make the sand from brownish red into white, or what are your plans? Where you get the iron ore from?
Yes. No, the dunes will not be mined. That's our heritage. We can't do that. But there are actually several possible sources of iron ore within Namibia. For example, there are some sources close to Walfish Bay. Then, of course, there's Dodabis with the Lodestone project. There are several other deposits also near Otjiwarongo, near Kamanyap, into the Ipupa region or into the Konene region. So there are several possibilities where we get it from. Currently, for the first production stages, we aim at getting, or we will use a mix from a lot of different sources. So not only from within Namibia, also some iron ores will come from South Africa, some from Australia. Because if you make trials, for example, just the trials or just the samples that, for example, Toyota wants, are already 5,000 tons. So that's 1/3 of our production, and they have different requirements towards the iron ores, and so it will be a very big mix. But at the end, our aim is to only use Namibian iron ores from the different regions.
Excellent. Another question? Okay, Reimer, you asked on behalf of Eberhard. Any other questions? Konrad Röder and Manuela Fischer. Edgar Bauch.
Yes, hello. How many workspaces will there be in the end, or what for Namibians?
Employment.
Yes. So in the first phase, it will be between 50 and 80 people. And in the last phase, it will be around 1,000, or not the last, in the third phase. I mean, the demand for iron is even bigger, but we estimate around about 1,000. But especially also in the construction phase, there are lots of jobs, and I think also very good jobs for what we need. So especially the assembly of the PV fields is very labor intensive. So currently there are around about 100 or 80 to 100 people on the construction side. Already for phase 2, it will then be almost 1,000 people that will be working to build that plant. And yeah.
Good. Konrad, Mr. Bauer, another one. So we got another 4 or 5 questions.
Quick question to you. Water requirements now in the first stage and water requirements when you scale up. You are recycling, but still you need fresh water for your electrolyzers. Where do you get it from in that part of Namibia?
Yeah. So the use of water that we have is very, very small because of the recycling. So we estimate that we need per day roughly 2 cubic meters. And currently, what we are doing is we are testing a system that works quite well. It condenses water from the air because we are relatively close to the coast. We have quite a lot of humidity in the air, and by condensing condensing the water from the air doesn't have any negative impact for someone, but is really easy to be realized. So that is our option 1 that we would like the most to do, because such small quantities wouldn't be a problem to condense them. Option 2 is to truck it from Arandis to the site, because it's 1 truck for 2 weeks. So that's such a small amount that is still doable.
Überschaubare Größe. I think the young man, and maybe then oder Karin erst, then the young man and Eki.
Thank you. We heard a lot about employment opportunities today in Namibia. There are, if you count them all together, then I wonder where all these people will come from. Will that also all be Namibians? And what is done to upskill them so far that they can do all this work that is, or can use the opportunities?
Yeah. Yeah, so that is true. We can see it. So many projects are coming up. So we, especially on the artisan side, we have a shortage. So people that can do diesel mechanics and mechanic work and electrical work and so on, it's already very difficult to get the right people for the jobs. And what we did before we started the project already 2 years ago is that we sent the first young students to Germany for an exchange, where they did a 1-year exchange, and where they learned a lot of the things that we do today. So for example, now the project engineer who's heading all the construction there, he's one of the people that went over to Germany to be trained. And we would like in future to do that much more. There's a lot of support for that, Germany, but also from Namibia. So both sides would be very happy to do that. That we accelerate a bit the vocational training of the people that we need, and I believe that this would be the best option to take. Also doing own training, but at first you need the trainers to train the people, and that's where we are short in. And I believe that that like this we can train the trainers, and when they are back, they can have their own trainees.
So capacity building is a big word.
Yes, and especially if it goes as quick as I believe it will go, this transition, I think we are already late to train the people that we will need in future.
Yeah, thank you.
The young man, yes.
Yes, good afternoon once again. My question is quite brief. I wanted to find out about the element of shared prosperity and wealth, in the essence of, will there be shares issued to the general public, or what are the post-employment criteria that the country can benefit from, since we know that we have a high poverty line, or the gap between the rich and the poor is quite high. So how do people participate in the wealth that will be created?
Yeah. So there's in general, of course, there are the jobs, and there's also the value that is produced within the country. So that will also generate the taxes and the value that stays in the country. So far, we as Namibia, we are a country to export raw materials. So we do not add much value to what we have in the ground. And I believe that it's essential that we change that. And for example, with reducing iron ore to make it iron, we quadruple roughly the value of the material that we export. So number one is employment, so directly going to people who will be part of that. The project, then it is the taxes that go to the general public. But then there are also other forms that we are discussing, for example, with the Ministry of Finance, also with the Green Hydrogen Commission, and so on, because we think that, for example, what has been established for the direct export of hydrogen, the sovereign wealth fund, I believe personally, and I think I can also speak for all my partners in the project, we believe that this is a very, very good development, and that in future also the benefits of the value that we can create here need to go into this into such a format like the sovereign wealth fund. At the same time, of course, we are in very strong competition, because we have to build everything from scratch, while, for example, most of the blast furnaces, they run for 30, 40 years. And so we have to compete with the technology and with manufacturers that don't have to finance the capital they need to establish such productions. So the price competition that we have is quite stiff. So we have to have a very good dialogue on how to spread the value or the surplus that can be generated from that. I think it is very, very important. It will be part of future discussions where the value that is created, for example, in hydrogen, where it's going to be taxed. And I think it will be very important to do it at the output, at the end product, and not not at the production factor. We have to make sure that the energy that we can use in the many different production fields that we can do with cheap energy stays cheap, and that we don't make it expensive. We have to tax the end product, then the value that has been made, and not the production factor. And that is something that we can see very well where, for example, China is extremely successful in. They do everything to get the energy prices as low as possible, and that's why a lot of the productions are moving there. And that is a very, very important point, I believe, that we need to consider in this important question that you raised.
Thank you, Johannes. I'm a geologist. That's why my question. Your ore which you receive from Dorab is it already milled? Because you said you would have to upgrade it with magnetic separation. Or do you have to install a mill or a crusher on site, or various crushers? Thank you.
Yeah. We will receive only fine iron ores for the moment. Yeah, it's an important question, because we can use fine material, but also coarse material. That is a big advantage, because the blast furnaces and shaft furnaces, they can only use big lumps. And to produce a big lump of iron ore, which is as pure as possible, is very problematic, or needs a lot of water, because you wash out the sand from the material. And I guess you know much better than me. But that's one of the key reasons why Namibia has never really been an iron ore exporter. I think Dorabis was now the first company to export something like 50,000 tons 2 years ago. But before, we've never really produced iron, even though we have the resources. And that is because traditionally, the iron ore market is for bigger grains. And this is now completely different for us, because we can use bigger grains, we can use smaller grains, but it will be quite efficient to make small grains, because in many parts of the world, like in South Africa, for example, also, the very fine material is waste material. There are some mines that have 20-30 million tons of fine-grained iron ore, which is waste, which has never been used. And such material we can use in our process. And that's a big advantage in several aspects. Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we're almost done. Have you got a final short question, please?
Last one. And what is the minimum grade you need to put in your
There
product?
is no, yeah, there's no minimum really. We can put in and take out what we want, but of course it's better if it's a good grade. We also work on a two-staged process. So, for example, that's what we're doing now with the RWTH Aachen, for example, and with some of the big miners in Australia. We think about doing a pre-reduction and then a separation again, and then another reduction step. So that we can go in with relatively low quality, but make a very high quality DRI then. So we don't have we can go in with a material of only 30% iron, but the question is then more economically, does it make sense to heat up so much sand, basically? It will not react with the hydrogen. The hydrogen is the expensive power, or the expensive energy source. So it will only use the energy to heat it up, but it's still quite a waste to put in a very, very bad material then.
Thank you, Johannes. You're almost done. Last question coming up.
Thank you very much. Johannes, I think just a question from my side. I think I identified two things. One is in terms of your location. You're far from the source, sort of like where the raw material is. You seem to have an issue. It needs to be transported from a distance afar. I would like to know, what is your supposedly your final output? Are you looking at steel that is sort of like added value to such a stage that you can supply, other more bigger sort of like facilities for further value addition? Or what are we looking at? Because you said earlier you tried to be cost effective, but I don't see that this is going to be cost effective. It's quite, I think it's almost like a premium product that you are going to push into the market. And then you mentioned the other thing, that's the international competition. I think it's quite a fiercely competitive global market. We know the strength of China, the advantages that they have and so on, and other players also. So what is the final output coming out of Namibia?
Okay, yes. Thank you for the question. So the final output that we produce is called direct reduced iron, so DRI, and more specifically, it is then CBI, so cold briquetted iron. It's a briquette of almost pure iron that then can be used in a steel factory or in a foundry. We will not produce steel here. That's quite a complex thing to do, to manufacture steel. We will produce pure iron. So this pure iron can then be melted and poured into forms, or it can be used in a steel factory somewhere in the world to manufacture steel. It is because it's such an energy-intensive process to make iron from iron ore. It is quite a big value addition, because to do this step, you need around about 3.5 megawatt hours of energy. So from the iron ore to the pure iron, per ton of pure iron, you need 3.5 megawatt hours of energy. And so the core expense in making this production step, by the way, also the production step that is so CO2 intensive, the main cost is energy. And of course also capital costs, because you need all the machines, but the essence of it is energy. And because in Namibia we have such good such good potential to produce energy at very, very low costs, we will demonstrate that it will make sense to do it here. And then of course we have the advantage that we are the first in the world that can supply iron at zero emissions. There's no one else yet, and everyone else is very far away from doing that. So we see our key advantages in being one of the first. It's also one of the key challenges, because we have to establish a market for green iron. There's no one who can offer it. No one knows the price. No one wants to be the first to say, okay, I'll pay that. But it is also a very huge chance to show that it's possible, and to do it in future, in different scales.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Thank you very much for all the questions. We've got a present for you, so next time you're in Windhoek, please phone me.
I will do so. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, wow. Thank you very much. That looks very good. I can't hear you now, but thank you very much.
Yeah, I've just got a question quickly. We can have a tea and coffee break now. It might be a mission to get everybody back quickly, or we can listen to the last presentation and then have a final coffee and tea together and wrap up. Jetzt oder später, now or later? Hands up for now. Later. Okay, let's have the coffee break now. Andersrum. Okay, let's carry on. Thank you. I just needed. Weit weg von Oran. Also, glaube ich, von Oran ist 20 Kilometer Richtung Uferpass.